Good day, everyone. So for today, we will be discussing about research conceptualization so that you can formulate a research title and design a study using qualitative research as an approach. And with that, let's recall the different methods that you can do with qualitative research. So for qualitative research, we have 5 different methods. First, you can do a document review wherein you will review existing documents, for example, research articles, published documents, so that you can gather information about a certain topic. So for example, one example that we have here is the ivermectin in COVID-19 management. What is the current evidence? So this is a research gathering all the current evidences from published articles or from research or from scientific articles, and that's a type of document review. Now, next one is you can also do a content analysis. So for content analysis, we can use a video, for example, this presidential debate, and then we can analyze the content based on our research questions. For example, our research question is how eloquent are the presidential candidates? So we can view the video and then analyze based on the video how eloquent they are or how eloquent the presidential candidates are. And that's a type of content analysis. So next one, we have observation. We can also do observation wherein we visit communities to observe how they interact. For example, this one in a documentary by Jessica Soho, they visited the community to observe how people or how this certain community interacts with this alligator. And then in another documentary, the team of Jessica Soho went to Palawan to observe the culture of these indigenous groups of people in Palawan. And that's a type of observation. And then you as a student, for example, you can also observe classes, ongoing classes, to observe how students participate during face-to-face classes. Or, for example, you can go to the mall and observe how people follow social distancing and other safety protocols. So that's a method of qualitative research. And then another one is through in-depth interview. So for example, you want to know certain perspectives of students, then you can conduct an interview or an in-depth interview to know more about their point of view and their perspectives. And another type of qualitative method is a focus group discussion, wherein you can gather a group of people and then have them discuss about a certain topic, have them gather their opinions and perspectives about this topic, and then all the information that you can get within that discussion, you can use that as your information to answer your research questions. For example, you will gather a group of people to know about the students' perspective on modular learning. And then you can gather all their perspectives, all their point of views and opinions about modular learning through their discussions. And those are the types of qualitative methods that you can do in your research. And with that, let's proceed to the research process. So in the following examples of the qualitative researches, for example, most of them are documentaries, and then each documentary have a certain focus, and there are groups of people who are the focus of the documentary. So in your qualitative research process, when you try to decide a topic, first thing you need to consider is whose experience are you going to study. Are you going to study the experience of students? Are you going to study the teachers, pet owners, Filipinos, administrators, or parents, and other groups of people? So you need to decide first whose experience are you going to study. In short, who are you going to interview, or who are you going to get the data from? And then after that, after you have decided who to focus on, the next one that you should decide on is which layer of experience are you going to explore. So are you going to explore the academic performance of the students, or are you going to explore their study habits? Or are you going to explore their learning approach, for example, modular versus digital learning? Or are you going to explore their challenges in this pandemic? Or for example, are you going to explore their perspectives on the type of social media that they use? Or for example, Are you going to explore their hobbies, for example, games or anime? So you decide which layer of experience are you going to focus on or are you going to explore. And then after that, you can decide now what question to ask. So for example, what are the perspective of students on modular learning? Or how do content creators create content? Or why do students rely on Google searches for answers? Or something like that. So once you decide on whose experience are you going to focus on, and then choose which layer of experience are you going to explore, then you can decide now or you can formulate now a research question on what to ask or what do you want to know about your subject or the one who you are focusing on. So for the questions, just make sure that your research question are exploratory questions. So for example, so these are questions that are not answerable by yes or no. So when you ask exploratory questions, these are the questions that rely on, for example, that asks about reasons of students or the factors affecting the decision of students to choose modular and digital learning. And for example, what are the perspectives of students on the current 2022 presidential elections or something like that. These are the questions or the type of questions that explore or that seeks to gather more information rather than asking for confirmation. So after you have formulated a research question or after you have decided on what question to ask, the next step would be to decide on what design to have. So there are 4 types of designs in qualitative research. First one is the phenomenology, next is the grounded theory, next one is the case study, and the narrative inquiry. And then we will be discussing these 4 types of research design in the next slides. But first, let me just explain the entirety of this research process. So after you decided on whose experience, and then you decide which layer of experience, and then after you have formulated a research question, and then you have decided on what design to have, the next step would be to decide where to source the data. And then after that, you will choose how many selection or how many people are you going to interview. And then after that, after you have gathered your data, the next step would be how to analyze the data, and the next one is to how to validate your findings. And then after that, the latter part of your research is to how to present the findings. And then after presenting your findings, you need to think about what did you learn and then what can you recommend. And then after you follow these steps, you will already have a qualitative research. So now that we have discussed the qualitative research process, the next one is to discuss the types of quantitative research design. So these are the phenomenology, grounded theory, case study, and narrative inquiry. So let's start by defining each one. So first one, we have phenomenology. This one explores the experiences of the subject from their own perspective. So when you have a study that focuses on the experiences of students, the perspective of parents, the perspective of teachers, so those are the type. So those studies are a phenomenology research design. And then the next one, we have ethnography. Although we won't focus on this one because we are in a pandemic and it's hard to visit communities just to observe and interact with the studies participants. So let's just define it first. So ethnography, it is a research design where researchers observe or interact with the studies participants in their real life environment. That's why we won't be doing a research using ethnography as a research design. So next research design is grounded theory. For this one, it inquires about a process and builds up a theory grounded on the collected data. So this theory usually starts with the question, how? How do people decide on what to buy? What groceries to buy during the pandemic? So it inquires about the process, which means, for example, the process of decision made by the people who buys groceries. And then based on the data that you have gathered, you will build up the theory on how they decide on what groceries to buy. So that's a type of grounded theory design. And then the next study or the next research design is a case study, wherein it describes an individual situation or a case and identify and analyze the key issues of the case. So for example, individual situation or a case, the case where students cannot go to school due to the pandemic. So that's a case. And you will identify and analyze the key issues of the case. So that's a case study. And then next one or the last one is a narrative study or narrative inquiry, wherein it collects and analyzes the accounts people tell to describe experiences and offer interpretation. For example, you want to interpret or narrate the experience of students who do not have gadgets during the pandemic. Then you will interview them and you will collect the data and then analyze and interpret their experiences. So that's a type of qualitative research. And with that, those are the types of qualitative research design. So to give you more of an idea about the types of research design, let's look at this table. So in the qualitative research design phenomenology, it focuses on the question, what? And then the nature of the question being asked, it's more of the essence or the essence of the experiences or the perspective and the meaning behind what people experiences. So what are the experiences of students who chose modular learning, or what are the experience of students who chose to drop out, or what are the experiences of students who chose to go back to school during the pandemic. So yon. And the selection or the population, usually it consists of 3 to 13 people that you will interview, and then the product realized or the output or the result or findings is a collective description, meaning it is a collective description of their experiences. So next one, for grounded theory, it centers more on the question starting with how, since the nature of question being asked is a process. So the focus of the question asked is more on the process, the procedure, or the decisions made by people. And then the selection or the population, it uses 20 or more people. It uses the use of saturation point. Saturation point meaning you will continually interview people until there are no further ideas or original ideas that are being said or that are being shared. So that's meaning the answers are already saturated, since most of the answers has already been given. So that's a saturation point. And then after that, the product realized or the output that you will provide is a theory based on or grounded on the data that you have collected. So that's grounded theory. And then the next one is a case study, and it centers on the question why. And the nature of the question being asked, it's more of an in-depth exploration of the issue or a descriptive review of the issue. So the focus of the question being asked is the issue, and then you will use a selection of one to many, meaning you will interview or you will gather data from one to many people, and then the product that you will realize or the output or the findings that you will provide are the lessons learned from the issue. So case study meaning it's an in-depth exploration of an issue or a case. And then last one is the narrative inquiry, and the goal of the narrative inquiry is to tell a story. So the nature of the question being asked is more of a story oriented. So the focus of the question is to provide a story. So you can select a few people, for example, 1 to 2 people, to narrate about the story of being a student mother, something like that, or the student's journey of becoming a working student or deciding to become a working student. And then the product that you will realize or the output that you will provide is a generalization of their story. And those are the types of qualitative research design. So here are examples of research studies under phenomenology. So first one, we have Mag-aral ay di biro, a phenomenological study on the lived experiences of the students on blended learning amidst COVID-19. So as you can see, it explores the experiences of the students on blended learning. So if we read their abstract, we can find that the main task is specifically to identify the lived experiences of the students towards blended learning amidst the pandemic. And it specifically aims or tasks to describe the experiences in blended learning and also to describe the challenges experienced by students on blended learning as well as to describe their coping mechanism. So a phenomenological study is more on describing the experiences of students. So let's check the research question of this study of this research. So first one, what are the experiences of junior high school students in blended learning amidst the pandemic? So that's their key research question. And then second one, what are the challenges that junior high school students experience on the blended learning amidst the pandemic? So that's another follow-up question but still related to their experiences. And then number three, how do junior high school students cope with blended learning amidst the pandemic? Again, that's another sub question or follow-up question but still related to the experience. So the next one, we have the sample research for ethnography, the everyday lives of men, an ethnographic investigation of young adult male identity. So if we read the abstract, it says here that the researchers spent over 2 years as a participant observer of a small group of men from a gymnasium in Melbourne. So as you can see, most ethnographic studies really observe and interacts with study participants for a longer periods of time. That's why we will not consider ethnography in our research study. But let's still check their research aims or their research questions. So based on their paper, it says here that they wanted to answer the question in relation to male and male identity on how do men construct and negotiate their friendships. So they observed young adult males for a span of 2 years just to investigate how do men construct and negotiate their friendships. And number two, how do definitions of masculinity relate to these friendships and to the men's everyday lives. So those are the research questions they attempted to answer for this ethnographic study. So let's move on to grounded theory research design. So here's a sample research entitled Being There, a grounded theory study of student perceptions of instructor presence in online class. So based on their abstract, the purpose of this study was to explore the perceptions of experienced individual online learning students at a community college in Texas in order to generate a substantive theory of community college student perceptions of online instructor presence. So if we take a look at their research questions, it says here, how do community college students describe their perceptions of instructor presence in the online classroom? And the sub-questions are, how important do students perceive instructor presence as a factor in their success in or satisfaction with an online class? And then sub-question B, we have, what experiences do students use to define instructor presence in an online classroom? And then for sub-question C, what experiences related to instructor presence have students had that they would like to see repeated in other online class? So as you can see, these questions are formulated to answer or to build a theory on how do college students perceive their instructor presence in an online class. So as you can see, most of the questions leads to a theory deciding on how do students or college students perceive online instructor presence. So next one, we have a case study entitled Exploring Esports, a case study of gameplay in Counter-Strike. And so, based on the abstract, their goal is to explore Counter-Strike through its cognitive, cultural, economical, and technological aspects of gameplay activities. So they will view the aspects of the gameplay in Counter-Strike based on certain aspects, which is cognitive, cultural, economical, and technological. So let's try to analyze or to understand this research in terms through its research aim. So based on its research aim, their intention is to illustrate the issues through results from an empirical study of Counter-Strike players. So they studied Counter-Strike players and they explore their approach in their perspective taken on gameplay and discuss gameplay in Counter-Strike in terms of how players' activities, the game's design and interface, and the culture and business surrounding Counter-Strike are interrelated. So they're related. They try to relate the cognitive aspects, technological aspects, economical aspects, and cultural aspects of Counter-Strike. And based on those study or based on their analysis, they will provide an in-depth description or in-depth exploration of how gameplay in Counter-Strike happens. And so that is an example of a case study. So next one, let's proceed to narrative inquiry. So for narrative inquiry, the sample research is entitled Bad Kids Gone Good, a narrative inquiry study of alternative education graduates. So if we read its abstract, the purpose of the narrative inquiry study was to conduct an in-depth exploration of the perceptives of two students who graduated from an alternative education program. So perceptions of the students were focused on what they attributed to as contributing reasons for their graduation for the program. So as you can see, it only focuses on two students and is more on narrating their story and creating a generalization to provide an information generalizing their reasons for their graduation. So now that we have discussed the different types of qualitative research design, let's now have this activity or recitation. So I want you to comment down below which type of research design do you prefer and explain why. And with that, that ends our lesson for today.